everybody. Welcome, or good morning or good evening, depending on which time zone you are calling in from. I am Dr. Stephanie Tireni Brown. I'm Director of the social enterprise Sustainable Thinking Scotland, where we grow fresh fruit and vegetables exclusively for food banks in the Falkirk area here in Scotland. And we take waste wood from the local councils and we make it into biochar, which we use for water remediation and soil enhancement. I'm also a very good friend of Dr. Ife Kanu, the CEO and founder of IntelliDigest, a company that she started in a bid to help end food waste and empower global food sustainability through tech, innovation, and capacity building. And we're really thrilled to have you all with us this afternoon to engage people, to discuss about sustainable food systems. I'm sure we'll have a lot of discussion around climate change and how we can build resilience into our food systems. So we're in for a really exciting afternoon, and I very much appreciate your time and attendance today, especially those of you that are in the south of the UK, where apparently I say, the weather is very hot and sunny and you're experiencing a heat wave, whereas here in Scotland, it's sideways rain, a lot of wind, and a typical Scottish summer. But today we will be hearing from world-leading experts and a really fabulous mix of practitioners and academics and policy folk, people who've got experience working everywhere from here in Scotland to Sierra Leone and everywhere north, south, east and west of there. We have a comments box, so please do make use of it. Please just stick your comments in when people are making their presentations. And if you've got questions for specific people, please put them in the comments box too. We've got two panels, panel 1 and panel 2, and we have a Q&A session after each of those. So please do make use of that comment box. We've got a very, very busy schedule this afternoon. So I will ask all of our speakers to keep to time. And if I feel that we're rumbling on a little too much, then I might interrupt you and ask you to bring a close today. So first up today, we've got a very interesting panel from Gemma Taylor, Deanna Olney, Dale Cranshaw, Samira Hotoba-During. And I will do a little introduction before each of you. So first up is Dr. Gemma Taylor. She's a research associate for new innovations at Crop Health and Protection, very cannily known as CHAP, where she helps to bring experts together to discuss problems in the UK agriculture sector and to come up with new ideas to help solve these problems. Gemma completed her PhD at the University of Warwick, where she looked at the breeding of late bolting varieties of rocket and subsequently has held positions in industry and academia, continuing the work of applied research in breeding horticultural crops in the UK and across Africa. Now, through her role at CHAP, which is one of the government's agri-tech innovation centres, Gemma is part of a team that strives to push forward technologies that support sustainable crop production, helping to address important global issues such as climate change.
Thank you so much for this invitation to come and join you today and tell you a little bit about CHAP's role in sustainable food systems. So I'm going to start by giving you an overview about CHAP and how we operate, and then share some case studies about some of the projects we've been involved with, which are contributing to a sustainable food system in the UK. So CHAP stands for Crop Health and Protection, and is one of the UK agri-tech centres which was set up in 2015-2016 by the government and is funded by Innovate UK to stimulate innovation and excellence in agriculture in the UK and beyond. There are 4 agri-tech centres, of which we are one, and the other 3 are Agrimetrics, which focuses on data, the Agri Epicentre, which works at everything engineering, and CL, which works on the livestock side of agriculture. So CHAP's vision is for the UK to be a global leader in the development of sustainable applied agri-technologies and to help secure our future by nourishing a growing population. As we want to do this with economic, environmental and health benefits to society. So to do that, CHAP serves to accelerate the identification, development and adoption of agri-tech solutions that deliver greater sustainability for farmers and the population. And CHAP connects the crop industry with the best research, industrial innovation, and government resources. And our ambition is to accelerate, to accelerate and have the adoption of agri-tech innovation for sustainable, resilient, nutritious, and climate positive crop production. So our sort of tagline is advancing crop productivity for a sustainable future. And we've got 5 key areas of focus that we work on to help everything sort of go in the same direction to help us achieve this aim. So these 5 are soil and crop health systems, crop and protein diversification, advancing intelligent agronomy, innovative crop health strategies, and controlled environment agriculture. And all that we do is heading in this direction, and we have a number of projects over CHAP which fulfill each one of these key areas of focus and allow us to really hit some of the big targets and concerns that are in agriculture, such as net zero and climate change, resilient food systems, and all those kind of things, which is brilliant. So CHAP wouldn't be able to achieve anything without the partnerships it has with industry and academia across the country, from those that help set up and advise CHAP to those which host our capabilities and work with us on projects. So our capabilities are open access facilities available for commercial and grant-funded projects for anyone who wants to use them. We have a range of capabilities from glass houses, vertical farms, and farm equipment, through to lab facilities such as molecular sequencing and phenotyping and imaging. We also have a membership community, both national and international, who are part of our network and who we support in the work they are doing across the supply chain in agriculture, of which IntelliDigest is one. Creating sustainable food systems will be core to how UK agriculture needs to adapt to the changes and challenges being imposed on it. There are a number of papers which outline what could and should change moving forwards, such as the National Food Strategy from Henry Dimbleby, the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Research paper by Chatham House, and the UK Food Systems Scenarios work by Global Food Security. And CHAP, with its goals and ambitions, capabilities and partnerships, are well placed to have a core role in this movement of change and adaptation going forwards. Indeed, many of our past and present projects are looking at aspects of sustainable food systems. So I'm now going to share with you a few case studies that give you a glimpse of the work that we do in this area. So our Natural Light Growing Centre is located at Warwick University and was built in partnership with RIPE. It is a greenhouse which is clad in ETFE, which allows much greater natural light transmission compared to glass, and one where natural biostimulants will be used. This combination should allow the delivery of a lower carbon footprint and higher quality and yields of fresh produce growing compared to conventional glasshouse systems. And this case study covers the initial work done to validate this unique growing environment. So this project, funded by Innovate UK, was to explore the effects of the full spectrum of light on the growth and health of baby cucumbers. No pesticides were used in the growth cycle, only biologicals were used if any pest issues did arise. The results showed that baby cucumbers could be grown in this environment and with an equivalent yield to conventional glasshouse environments. The plants showed good resistance to pest and disease, suggesting that the combination of full UV spectrum, good nutrition, and the use of biostimulants does produce a healthier crop. The cucumbers themselves were found to be sweet and tasty and good overall quality, which is reflected by the sales figures at key local markets and distributors. The next case study, which is called Precision Approaches for Sustainable Soils, utilised CHAP's strip till farm equipment at STC as part of a much larger set of studies from the Diversify project, which is funded by the EU Horizon 2020 programme. And this project aimed to increase biodiversity in crop systems through polyculture, particularly in using clover as a living mulch. The strip till machine allowed the precise sowing and cultivation of cereals into clover, so intercropping, reduced tillage, and soil health could be assessed. And this next project, looking at turning water treatment waste into liquid fertilizer, was a short-term project funded by Innovate UK, which worked with water abstracted from the ground to remove nutrients which aren't suitable for drinking water, and turning this into a new liquid fertilizer for inclusion in agriculture. And although it was only a short trial, the liquid fertilizer created from nutrient waste was tested in a hydroponic system in a chap vertical farm, and it showed both a modest increase in yield and a likely reduction in carbon footprint of production, and therefore would be a sustainable product for us. And this last case study is one program that is still active at the moment. It is nicknamed Jaiponics and is a partnership between CHAP, AEH Innovative Hydrogels, Robotic Systems, and the University of Manchester, and is also funded by Innovate UK. It was put together because a number of the growth substrates that are currently used in horticulture and vertical farming, such as rockwool and peat, are expensive to produce and have significant environmental footprints, which limits the ability of hydroponic growing systems in contributing to net zero food production systems. So this project aims to tackle this problem by developing an autonomous, sustainable, and cost-effective hydroponic system centered around a novel, smart hydrogel growing media with precision nutrient delivery that is reusable and recyclable. It has been run in part at CHAP's vertical farm at STC. And the results so far are suggesting this hydrogel is able to compete with rockwool in performance and yields, but that further work needs to be done to assess its full usefulness and commercial potential. So I hope this has given you a bit of a flavour about who CHAP are and the kind of work we do, and particularly in the area of sustainable food systems. We'd love to partner with you on projects that continue to improve this, so please do get in touch, and my contact details are here. So does anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Gemma. That was a really wonderful overview of the work that you're doing at CHAP. And it sounds like there's some fascinating projects going on. I'm a complete water geek, so the case study that you brought up about the liquid fertilizer from wastewater sounds remarkable, because I think I do a lot of work on wastewater. I could talk about it all day, but I won't, because it's the wrong topic. But being able to utilize that for a very, being able to find fertilizer from that sounds absolutely incredible. So maybe what I would ask you to do is, if you have any papers from that, would you mind sharing them with IntelliDigest, and we can circulate them, because I'm sure we'll have people who'd be interested in some of the research from that. In fact, we had one of the comments from Professor Adeloye, who was saying that, the question about does CHAP have any focus including water security? But then you mentioned water in one of your slides. So I was just, could you talk a little bit about that? Although it's not one of the focus, do you?
It's not something that we particularly go out and target, because we're not a water company, and we are looking at sort of agriculture and sustainability and that kind of work. But we're very much aware that we're sort of in times where things need to change, and things like circular economy are becoming really important. And so having water and everything sort of encapsulates in that kind of industry as part of what we do to link everything together is really important. And we a couple of years ago put together an innovations program, which is what my main job is about, to look at controlled environment agriculture. And one of the solutions that came out of that, which we're hoping to get interest in and get forwards for funded, is about linking energy, food and water together in a sort of nexus program to allow all those kind of industries to talk to each other, to be able to create a better circular environment and economy system. We'd love to share more with you about that. So please do get in contact, and we can tell you more about that program and where we want to go with it.
Super. Thank you ever so much for that. We'll save other questions, I think, for the panel Q&A in a minute, if you don't mind. But thank you ever so much for that really fascinating presentation.
Great. Thanks very much.
Next up, we have Deanna Olney. Deanna Olney is a Senior Research Fellow and Theme Leader for Nutrition-Sensitive Programs at the International Food Policy Research Institute. Deanna has a PhD in Nutritional Biology from the University of California, Davis. She is also the lead of a new CGIAR research initiative, Fruit and Vegetables for Sustainable Healthy Diets, snappily titled FRESH. Her research focuses on understanding the impacts of multi-sectoral and nutrition-sensitive interventions and programs on diet, nutrition, health, and well-being outcomes, and how impacts are achieved and their cost effectiveness. Deanna works closely with implementing organizations such as the World Food Programme and the Helen Keller International, and government partners to design and implement program innovations and associated evaluations. These close collaborations and the evidence generated can be leveraged to fill local and global evidence gaps and to translate research into program and policy actions. Deanna, welcome. I don't know if it's morning or afternoon where you are, I'm not sure. Welcome to the group, and I'll ask you to take it away.
Great, thank you. Yes, it's morning. I'm on the East Coast of the US, so yeah, thanks for having me. And as was mentioned, I'm going to be talking today about the new CGIAR initiative that I'm leading that was just launched about a month ago on fruits and vegetables for sustainable, healthy diets. And this initiative is one of 33 initiatives under the CGIAR, which are envisioned to be 9 to 10-year research initiatives. And this was designed by several partner organizations, both within the CGIAR, which has organizations like the International Food Policy Research Institute, where I work, CIMMYT, the Alliance for Biodiversity, and CIAT, the SIP, which is around the International Potato Center, Africa Rice, and the International Water Management Institute, along with several others. We also collaborated for designing this initiative with external partners from the CGIAR, which included the World Vegetable Center, Applied Horticultural Research based in Australia, Wageningen University, the University of California, Davis, University of Sydney in Australia, and the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. The main challenges that this initiative is designed to address revolve around the primary challenge of the intake of fruits and vegetables, which is far too low globally, affecting nearly every country in the world. And this is contributing to poor quality diets and in turn, high prevalence of malnutrition and diet-related non-communicable diseases. The key barriers that have been identified to increasing intake of fruits and vegetables include low availability. We know that the gap between supply and demand for vegetables is very large, and this is in part due to post-harvest losses, which can be nearly half of what is produced. There's also issues related to accessibility, where we know that safe, diverse fruits and vegetables are often not easily accessible to everyone, and especially if this especially affects marginalized populations. Affordability is also a challenge. We know that costs of safe, diverse fruits and vegetables are very high and often much higher than staple foods or highly processed foods that may not be as good for nutrition and health. However, we also know that even when fruits and vegetables are available, accessible, and affordable, many people decide not to eat those and choose other types of foods to eat. And these choices about what people eat are very complex and are often driven by considerations other than cost and health, such as convenience, time, image, palatability, and culture. To date, research in these areas is sparse and fragmented, and so the FRESH initiative is aiming to address all of the barriers that were just identified, but also looking to consolidate research in these areas to have a more concerted effort to addressing all the various issues that are contributing to low intake of fruits and vegetables worldwide. FRESH is using an innovative, holistic, end-to-end approach where we are aiming to start with consumers and looking at issues related to assessing first what are the dietary intake patterns for fruits and vegetables, what are the gaps in fruit and vegetable intake that are related to nutrient gaps, and potentially allowing space for more unhealthy foods, high sugar, high fat foods. Working with them to identify within each of our focus countries what are the primary barriers to increasing fruit and vegetable intake. At the same time, we'll be working closely with farmers and other value chain actors to understand constraints to increasing supply of affordable, safe, and sustainable produce. Throughout this end-to-end approach, we'll be working with partners along the value chain and with government partners and multilateral organizations, civil society organizations, to co-design and evaluate innovations along the value chain, as well as policies to address barriers throughout the value chain to support fruit and vegetable-rich diets, and to replicate and scale successful approaches. Our primary aim is to improve diets and ultimately nutrition and health, but we also aim to simultaneously reduce poverty, empower women and youth, make vegetable production systems more resilient, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions and draw down carbon. Across the supply chain, we have different areas of focus. Within the supply side activities, we have 3 areas of focus. And here we are aiming to increase the availability and decrease the cost of vegetables specifically. Our primary target groups for these activities are farmers and other value chain actors, especially women and youth. The challenges that we aim to address within the supply side revolve around 3 main components. The first around biodiversity, breeding, and seed systems. And here over the next 3 years, we're looking to work with 10,000 farmers, about half of which we hope will be women, to adopt improved climate resilient vegetable cultivars that align with consumer, farmer, and other value chain actor preferences. And this we expect to impact, reduce poverty, improve livelihoods, and have some effects on climate adaptation, mitigation, environmental health, and biodiversity, and have a focus on improving gender equality, especially. Another set of challenges is around production and production diversity and sustainable production. Here we aim to reach 10,000 farmers, again, half of which we aim to have as women, to adopt safe and sustainable vegetable production practices. And here we expect the same range of impacts. The last area that we will address on the supply side revolves around post-harvest processing and food safety. Here we aim to work with the private sector and different partners within the private sector to co-design and pilot innovations to reduce post-harvest losses and to improve food safety. Next, we will work directly within the food environment, and here our focus is on increasing the accessibility and affordability of fruits and vegetables, and our primary target groups will be to work with marginalized groups. The challenges that we aim to address within the food environment revolve around affordability, inequity, food promotion, where we have highly processed foods and unhealthy foods being heavily promoted, and finding ways to promote and encourage intake of fruits and vegetables. Retail, where product placement and other issues around the retail environment would come into play. Food provision, which is related to institutional or school meal quality, where food is provided through government-supported programs, and to see if there are ways to influence the provision of foods to include fruits and vegetables. And also working on the policy environment, specifically working with laws and regulations related to food retail, food provision, etc. And the main outcome for the next 3 years for this set of activities is to work with key actors across our focal countries, to work with them to have them actively engaged with us in designing and testing interventions to increase accessibility and affordability. And here we aim to have impact on nutrition, health, and food security, again on reducing poverty and improving livelihoods, and a specific focus on equity across gender, youth, and social inclusion dimensions. Lastly, we work with consumers, and here we're focusing on increasing the desirability and affordability of fruits and vegetables. Here, our primary target groups are young children, adolescents, and women, and they've been chosen because they either are known to influence what is brought into the house and eaten amongst the household members, as well as having more malleable, preferences. So young children, adolescents are people that you would want to influence their intake, because we know that habits that are developed when you are young can influence what you eat over the course of your life. There's also some evidence to suggest that what women eat while they are pregnant influences the preferences of their babies, and those can last throughout their lifetime. And adolescents also are at a decision-making point in their lives where they're starting to have more agency as to what they eat. And so working with them directly at that time when they're starting to make their own choices could be another key time to influence habits and behaviors and food preferences. So the challenges that we're working with on the demand side relate to affordability, poor quality diets, preferences, things like convenience and time, household decision making. Again, what is the influence of different household members on deciding what actually is available at the household level and what is served at family meals or in other situations. And again, working across the policy environment, which we aim to do across all of the areas of our research initiative. The primary outcome over the next 3 years for this set of activities is, again, to work with stakeholders within each of our focus countries and to actively engage with them in designing and testing interventions to increase fruit and vegetable intake directly. So this set of activities we envision will have the most direct impact on increasing fruit and vegetable intake and impacts on related nutrition and health outcomes. We will likely be using some social protection type approaches, such as vouchers for fresh fruits and vegetables and other types of social protection programs, which may have effects on poverty. And also we'll be working directly with women and youth, and so working on issues related to gender equality, youth, and social inclusion as well. For the first 3-year period of this research initiative, we have 4 focus countries, 2 in Asia and 2 in Africa. In Asia, we have Sri Lanka and the Philippines, and in Africa, we have Benin and Tanzania. At the national level within these countries, we also aim to work with the national level actors to increase the prioritization of fruits and vegetables and institute national level policies, laws, or regulations aimed at increasing fruit and vegetable intake, production, food safety, and equity. And we also are aiming to create a fruit and vegetable knowledge hub, which we hope will reach 10,000 users in the first 3 years, to have them use this as a resource for learning about fruits and vegetables, research, and innovations. Just to give you an idea of how we envision the fresh end-to-end approach working within a single country, we are using Tanzania as an example. Here we will have 2 production hubs to start, which will be located in the north of the country. Those production hubs will have value chains that then work. They can be either short or long value chains, which would then reach different food environments in different areas of the country. And so we will work directly with those food environments to see how changes in production and changes directly within the food environment are affecting what is available and the cost of different fruits and vegetables. And then we'll also look at catchment areas around those food environments and also directly at the producer household level to see if we can also work with the consumers to directly change their preferences and habits and to take advantage of changes in the production value chains and food environment to take all of these activities together to increase the intake of fruits and vegetables. And just in general, I just want to thank everybody who has contributed to making this initiative possible, including our donors and our donor group, our technical advisory group, all of the different colleagues that have worked on creating this initiative, our communications team, which at IFPRI, which helped to develop the slides that I presented today, including our graphics design team and other members of our initiative. For more information, you can look at these links that are displayed here. So thank you very much. And that's all from me.
Thank you so much, Deanna. That was absolutely fascinating stuff. Really and talk about end to end. We really went from the beginning to the end of really complex stuff there. I'm sure that we're going to have a really interesting discussion and that there are a lot of questions that will come up for you. But just to keep us to time, I'll keep those questions till the end of the panel, if that's okay.
Yeah,
I know I've got about 12 anyway. And I will ask to move on to our next presenter, please, Dale Cranshaw. So something coming. There we go. Hello, Dale. How are you?
Hi, good. Can you hear me and see the presentation okay?
I can certainly hear you and see you. I can't see a presentation just yet. There we go. It's coming. There we go. Absolutely lovely. Dale Cranshaw, the head of Food for Life Get-Togethers program at the Soil Association. And Dale has 18 years experience in community development, sustainability, health and social care and social enterprise in the UK and across Africa. Currently, he heads up Food for Life Get-Togethers. I've really said that badly, sorry. A £5 million UK-wide programme which builds community capacity and leadership in food growing, cooking and sharing activities for the benefit of people and the planet. The programme has brought together over 3,000 network community organisers who have run good food activities and has reached over 145,000 beneficiaries, with a particular focus on those from the most deprived communities of the UK. Dale believes in the importance of developing leaderful communities to enable the transition to healthy and sustainable diets for all, and has led the co-design of My Food Community, a leadership development programme for good food champions to learn, connect and take action, which is currently recruiting its second cohort. He also leads a diversity and inclusion working group at the Soil Association and is increasingly interested in this area as he believes strongly in the benefits of diversity for organisations, communities and the environment. What an intro. Dale, take it away.
Thanks very much for that, and for the opportunity to speak today. I'm going to give a bit of an overview of recent research we've done with Coventry University, which helped us understand participation in community food activities. And the reason why we wanted to explore that further was because we see having more people, more community members, playing more active roles in food systems, or more active food citizenship roles rather than sort of more passive food consumer roles, enables those food systems to become more resilient and to hopefully deal with the shocks that we're seeing in our food system today. So first of all, a little bit about the Soil Association. We have a vision of regeneration, a world in good health, in balance with nature and a safe climate. And we cover a whole range of different areas of work, which is shown on this slide. But essentially, they boil down to a belief in developing natural solutions that support people to improve food and farming systems for climate, nature and health. So we want to achieve that vision by delivering 3 key transitions in the food and farming sector. Firstly, a transition to agroecology and regenerative forestry in farming and land use. Secondly, a transition to healthy and sustainable diets and living for all. And thirdly, joining forces between those 2 transitions, recognizing that there are opportunities across the farm to fork journey to join forces for positive change and deliver a better future for nature, climate and people. So just a brief overview of what I'll cover today, then just want to give you a bit of an outline of that research I mentioned. Secondly, share how we're applying some of the findings from that research into our practice already. And thirdly, just signpost you where you can find out a bit more. So diving into the research then, this research was made possible by funding from the National Lottery Community Fund as part of the Food for Life Get-Togethers programme. And we commissioned Coventry University's Research Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience to help us explore the motivations, barriers and enablers for participation in community food activities. There's a wealth of information and insight in the research, so I'll only be able to cover a brief overview today, but I would encourage you to explore some more details later. I guess the key finding for me was the acknowledgement of this importance of a social ecological approach to participation to help us understand what was going on here. So this recognises that there are multiple factors across multiple levels that influence participation in community food activities. So this diagram here starts in the sort of blue circle in the middle at the individual level. And that recognises that we all have different knowledge, skills, attitudes, values and beliefs that influence that ability to participate in community food activities. Moving outwards into the green sphere is the family level. So that is the level where we see close relationships with family members and friends influencing our behaviour again. Beyond that is the community level in the yellow circle there, which is thinking about places like settings like schools, which influence our opportunities to participate in community food activities, as well as places like care homes, community kitchens, gardens, and the characteristics or the demographics of a place as well. I'm into that level. Moving outwards again, the organisational level, that's where organisations like the Soil Association sit, who are trying to influence change there. And finally, the final circle is the policy level, thinking about government policies or societal norms of regulations that influence healthy and sustainable diets and participation in community food activities. So this, to me, was a really important area of the research, in that it helped us intrinsically understand that there's no one intervention that will help at just a single part of that level, or just trying to address one factor there. That will ultimately help us with this desired transition to healthy and sustainable diets. We need to work across the levels and recognise that there are multiple factors at play. And I expect that everyone here can kind of relate to this themselves. If you think about placing yourself in that blue circle, how are you influenced by your food choices, or how are they influenced by your family and friends and the community around you, the access points that we've been hearing about already, and the organisations that are influencing your thinking, as well as the policy environment that influences you further. So that was a really key finding for us, and the research went on to delve into the details of across those sort of key areas of barriers, enablers and motivations at each of those different levels, and pulled those together into themes at each level and for each area. I'm not going to go through all of those today, but just wanted to delve into a little bit more detail on the enablers that enable greater participation in community food activities. And this slide just shows how the research delved into the detail at each of those individual family, community, organisation and policy levels, and then pulled together the key themes, five key themes that were cross-cutting between them. And then delving into the research even further, it looked at those key themes and then made recommendations about at the organisational level or at different levels. This slide particularly shows the organisational level with the enabling factors that we could all apply to increase participation in community food activities. So these were 5 key points. First of all, co-designing activity with the community, ensuring that there is that buy-in from the start to ensure greater ownership and solutions that really meet that local community needs. Secondly, enabling access to key resources. So that's things like grants at different sizes and scales, as well as things like training and resources to enable greater knowledge and skills development. Thirdly, supporting effective networking and building community champions or leadership capacity, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that shortly. Fourthly, building a learning community, so where people can learn and reflect on what's worked and what hasn't in trying to affect participation in community food activities in that place. And then finally, building an inclusive approach, recognizing that we need to build safe and inclusive spaces for people to take part. Interestingly, it also talks about the unique role that some organisations like the Soil Association play as a civic enabler, both working sort of downstream at the community, family and individual level, as well as trying to influence change sort of horizontally, if you like, across the organisation level with other organisations, as well as sort of upstream towards that policy and environment level as well. So it's an interesting way for us to start to frame and think about how we work and where we work. And that sort of led us to apply some of the learning into our practice. So within the Food for Life Get-togethers programme, we've been supporting the effective networks and partnerships and building that learning community that it talked about in the research. Working with local partners, we're platforming solutions that work from at that sort of hyper-local community level, inspiring other people into action and making the connections across the good food movement to enable it to thrive. And then we've also really honed down on our thinking and our interventions around how we build that community champion capacity that it talked about in the research. And we've done that through a program called My Food Community, which we're now just going to watch a short film on if the technology works for us. Hoping to, I thought you were going to.
My Food Community is a leadership programme to help build your knowledge, skills and expertise on leading a good food movement. So if you're passionate about making a change where you live around good food, local food systems and increase your own knowledge around what makes things work, please join us today.
I just started in the role of Food Poverty Coordinator and I saw an opportunity to bring together different people in the food world into this sort of like training, learning, development space.
As being a nutritionist, I was naturally drawn to this programme.
I'm quite new to my role in my community and it was just a really nice chance to be able to start to connect with other people, not just UK-wide but also some of my neighbouring projects in South Wales, which was really important to me.
So it's been great to be part of a big group of people and they're all from slightly different organisations or backgrounds, so no one group is all the same. So we've got this massive diversity of knowledge and experiences and it's really made me think about things differently.
The most important benefit gain for us being part of this is the networking. So it's extraordinary to be able to share ideas, see what's happening in other parts of the country. It just gives you that little bit of extra motivation and confidence and inspiration to try new ideas yourself.
I value all of it, every little bit of it.
It's given me more ideas and more connections with like-minded people. So it makes you feel much stronger as a person to deliver because you know it's not just you, you're part of a bigger something, a bigger picture.
For me personally, it can be quite difficult when you're looking at such like systemic issues such as poverty. It can feel quite isolating and alienating. So My Food Community gives you inspiration, but also really gives you that connection to other like-minded people. That unity of coming together with other people can help you feel like you're really making a difference.
I would definitely recommend My Food Community. I've really enjoyed it. It's a really good cross-section of people who are involved in it and the team who run it have been really kind. Yeah, it's for everybody. Go for it. You really enjoy it.
I would recommend My Food Community to anybody out there who is really wanting to make a difference when it comes to their community.
It's a really good opportunity to learn from other people, to kind of look outwards and share that inspiration, share that learning.
It's been great to be part of. Real privilege.
It's like meeting your tribe. I would recommend My Food Community to anyone who's interested in anything from saving the planet to stopping food from going to landfill, to being concerned about families that are dropping into poverty, to looking at ways of community cohesion. If you've got an interest in that area, then using My Food Community as your start point, you will really come up with some great ideas and you'll find that the impact you have in your community will just be very, very rapid and it's got sustainability built into it as well. So once you start these activities, it's amazing how they grow. And you actually do end up with a whole new set of friends who have all got the same passion and interest that you do.
And so we can share the links afterwards to how you can find out more by accessing our webpage around My Food Community. And we are, as was mentioned earlier, we are currently recruiting our second cohort for the My Food Community programme. Applications are coming in at the moment, and we'll be closing on the 11th of July. So if you know anyone in the UK who'd like to get involved in that, please do point them our way. If you'd like to find out hear a bit more about the research that I've just outlined here, really only have scratched the surface, but there is a webinar with a bit more of a deep dive into the research, led by the research team who delivered the project for us from Coventry University. And again, the links there to that. Or if you prefer to read the research reports, then you can access those on our website. There is a literature review, an empirical study, and also a synthesis report as well. And finally, if you're interested in those networking events that I mentioned, you can sign up on our website too. Just finally, from me, a little look ahead to what's coming up. So we have got a new research project, which is just getting going at the moment. Again, it's with Coventry University's Research Centre for Agroecology, Water and Resilience. And essentially, it's covering these two key research questions, but looking at the approaches and the metrics that agencies or organisations have used to successfully improve the health and sustainability of diets in communities and places. And then looking at what are the kind of frameworks that we could put in place, like the social ecological approach that I mentioned earlier, to be able to effectively enable that transition to healthy and sustainable diets in communities and places, and crucially track progress against it as well. So that's it from me. Hand back to you.
Great, thank you ever so much, Dale. That was really fascinating. Sorry about the technical hiccup there, but I'm pretty sure no webinar is complete, no successful webinar is complete without at least one minor technical hitch.
Absolutely, absolutely. I was tempting fate by trying to play it. Anyway.
Great. Well, as I know we've got some questions coming in. I'm really excited to discuss them with the rest of the panel in a few minutes. But we've got one other very exciting speaker to come up before we lead to our Q&A. So thank you very much, Dale. And next up, we're going to hear from Samira Hotoba-During. So welcome, Samira. How are you?
Hello, everybody. And good question, because I'd been suffering with a bit of cold and I think summer flu, so maybe my voice is a bit croaky, but here I am.
We can hear you loud and clearly.
Okay,
so we're very happy to have you joining us. So Samira is a consultant and senior advisor at the World Food Programme, the lead and focal point for the Resilient Local Food Supply Chains Alliance, one of the coalitions of the United Nations Food Systems Summit, which was under the action area of building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stresses. Prior to joining WFP, Samira worked at IFAD as an advisor to the Associate Vice President and CFO in the Financial Operations Department. She has a broad range of experience in the food and agricultural development, finance, and political arenas. Samira worked as a senior consultant to the CEO of the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, advising on resource mobilization for the agency and for programs. She was the Director of Advocacy and Resource Mobilization for the Forum of Agricultural Research in Africa and Head of Donor Relations at the Africa Rice Centre, a 1CGIAR organisation. Samira served as an advisor and technical expert to the Minister of Finance in the Republic of Sierra Leone and as a special advisor to the President in the Office of the President Republic of Sierra Leone in the post-conflict period of rebuilding, rehabilitation and reform in the country. Samira, take it away.
I think I have tried to upload the slides. I don't know whether you do. Yes.
We can see them. Yes, we can.
Okay. The Resilient Local Food Supply Chains Alliance is one of the coalitions that came out of the UN Food Systems Summit in 2021. And it is one of the 30 or so. It is supported by the World Food Programme under the action track, building resilience to vulnerabilities, shocks and stresses, but it's now called the action area. The purpose of the alliance is focused on resilient local food supply chains. By local, we mean national or subnational, to include urban and rural communities. The alliance is now being seen as an opportunity to engage with countries and provide support, especially during this period of multiple crises that need urgent action. The priorities, the objectives, and actions have evolved from countries and stakeholder communities and stakeholder groups. You can see here that on this slide, we talk about the alliance fulfilling a number of SDGs, not in their entireties, but actually indicators on these specific SDGs that are up here: 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and of course 17, which is for partnerships, and related to SDGs 13 and 15 for human development and climate action. And Human Development Peace Nexus and the Climate Resilience coalitions are also part of the WFP stable of coalitions. And the alliance looks at, within the context of weak food systems, fragile states, post-conflict settings, and of course the objectives of the alliance would be to maintain also social cohesion. It is about integrated approaches to ensure locally produced food contributes to resilience and contributes to increased food availability, affordability, and accessibility, and variety for enhanced nutrition and consumer choice. Ultimately, of course, it improves farmers' livelihoods, because if you target food production and increase productivity, you are addressing farmers, small-scale farmers, and subsistence farmers, increasing job opportunities, especially for the youth and for women, and increased incomes, which leads to increased revenue. It then, of course, contributes to economic growth. I'll go to the next slide and see whether we have, This slide points out that recently, when we had a meeting with stakeholder groups, we sent out a survey, and they came up with about 10 areas, but 4 top areas, which are the areas that we had identified at the beginning of the establishment of the alliance, which would be to diversify local production, to meet local needs and demand, to facilitate access to inputs and finance for small producers and local food value chain actors, and for post-harvest management. In the next slide, we see that these are the full top country priorities, in fact, where the respondents of the survey identified developing short supply chains to build resilience, and especially vis-a-vis current global crisis, COVID-19, food prices, and supply chains. E-commerce and digitalization was also an important aspect, which would be to open the agricultural sector to modern technology, which is one of the areas that IntelliDigest works in. And then to look at multi-risk management along food value chains, which is what a lot of the farmers struggle to cope with, and that they feel that there should be more support in that. And then, of course, there's the age-old issue of equitable access to productive land and other resources. And this is usually for women, smallholder farmers, and the youth who want to get into agriculture, not necessarily at the low scale, but using land for using new technologies. And they also had identified capital investment in risk-proofed infrastructure, and of course, focus on gender and youth. And then in the survey, the top 3 actions that were identified for the alliance were to build research partnerships at global and regional levels. And here we have already a Director General of one of the CGIAR institutions, sorry, I think I have to go back here, that is interested in working in one of our task forces that we're going to be setting up. We're going to be setting up 3 task forces on technical issues, on investments, and also on agricultural development issues, but that will be left to the member states, and I'll come to the working of the alliance later, and that will help us. The involvement of the leadership of the 1CGIAR DG will help us in looking at how we would build research partnerships across the various research institutions. We also have universities involved in the alliance, and within Africa, within Asia, and within the US. The other areas that the participants who responded talked about the integration of multi-risk management measures against shocks and stresses at the regional and national levels. So they identified that we need to go further than just national levels, but also regional, for reasons of the fact that there are ecological reasons and also demographies. And then they would want a peer-to-peer exchange mechanism. And that's one of the foundational aspect of the alliance, is to facilitate best practices, set up a network for our partners at the global and regional levels to be able to share knowledge and share best practices and share experiences. But they also wanted support for national monitoring and data initiatives. And this is a full list. It's only about 6 main areas, but they wanted to set up a multi-sector financing task force. As we all know that financing and investments are, hugely important for any of the programs, interventions that countries want to engage in. And they also see that we should support with establishing principles for inclusive participation of marginalized communities. This probably came from the CSO and NGO communities, because they think sometimes that there's not enough inclusiveness between state and non-state actors. And also one of the areas that a number of countries have talked about is to support on advocacy and outreach at the national level. This is a continuation of the national dialogues that had happened during the Food Systems Summit process. But this is to ensure that mainly in the area of getting a consumption patterns changed. I think one of the earlier speakers spoke about people's rejecting local foods, and some countries want to bring that back. And that is also another area that the Alliance wants to look at, is to increase advocacy and outreach on good, nutritious local foods, so that people can see that as alternatives to expensive imported foods. The priority areas that this is going back a little bit, that when we set up the Alliance during the Food Systems Summit last year, and it started out from receiving solutions from member states and stakeholders. And the ones that came into the action track, we saw that they neatly fitted into these areas in terms of strengthening local and regional food supply chains, local production for local consumption, public procurement. And public procurement here is in terms of ensuring that it is a tool for demand-driven and well-functioning community agri-food markets. So it will drive issues such as homegrown school feeding, supporting women farmers, supporting small-scale farmers. So that is seen as a tool, and we saw that coming through in the solutions that were coming in. Increasing women's agency for resilience through economic empowerment is another one, where people thought that women needed more access to credit, more blended finance initiatives. And of course, the securing equitable access to land, to productive land. And investment in infrastructure was also another big area, especially including for post-harvest losses. In fact, one of the regional organizations in Africa talked about 100 million grain stores, which would, I mean, it's a good objective, and it is not unachievable, but it is something that consolidates the mind into thinking that you do need grain stores, because that is one of the areas that the farmer is not incentivized to grow because of lack of post-harvest loss infrastructure. And then there was food storage facilities, grain stores, using a combination of public private actions, especially seeing the recent crisis. The countries are increasingly talking about buffer stocks and strategic reserves. And then there's a policy on institutional innovations for rural areas, and a focus on pandemic resilient food systems, which links nicely to the buffer stocks and strategic reserves. But
Samira, can I to wrap up, please?
Yes,
we need to have some time for Q&A because it's just too interesting.
It is exactly. So I think that this is not the slides I wanted to use, but I just want to say that these are clear objectives. And how are we set up? We have the 3 Rome-based agencies. WFP is in the lead, with FAO and IFAD supporting us, and the United Nations Capital Development Fund. But our biggest supporter is the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, which comes in with its convening power of African member states, as well as we had the support of the Democratic Republic of Congo, which was last year the chair of the African Union. We also have a number of countries in Asia and Latin America that have supported us. So it's a global alliance, but since we can't do everything at once, we would be addressing countries in a phased approach. So I'll leave it here for now, and I'm sure that there would be many questions.
I'm sure there will be. Thank you very much, Samira.
Or if not, we can send more information out to people.
So I'll say a big welcome back onto the stage to Gemma and Deanna and Dale, and obviously we've got Samira here as well. A really interesting mix of presentations there. I mean, crossing everything from kind of innovation at the very kind of beginning of its innovation lifestyle plan to kind of community integration, working with community champions. It's something that Dale mentioned and also kind of Deanna touched on. And then obviously to the kind of very large scale stuff that Samira was talking about. One of the questions that we've had has come in from Christian, and that's about, I think it's addressed directly to Samira, is about how do you engage with kind of big forums like the World Economic Forum, where he said that there wasn't an awful lot of focus, if any, on good food production. And that probably touches on something that I'm sure that Dale also is trying to lobby for as well to the UK government and others. But I'll pass it over to Samira in the first instance.
Okay, 2 things here. One is thanks for the question, and I didn't get the name of the person who sent the question in. But 2 things. It's we focus on local food supply chains, resilient local food supply chains. So our focus is to make countries and non-state actors, state and non-state actors, focus on how to build local food supply chains. Where we may need to involve the global agencies, such as the WEF, or in this case, because it's led by the UN agencies, say the World Trade Organizations, there is another architecture which is called the Hub, which has come out of the Food Systems Summit. And where countries debate on these issues and they want changes in agreements or changes in what happens at the global level, we'll pass that on to the Hub. And the Hub will take that to the annual convene, the high-level panel, to discuss, because a number of countries have brought this up. They look at trade issues and they think that there are imbalances in trade issues, and especially the crisis that we're seeing now. Although it's new, but these are issues, and that's why the alliance was popular with a number of countries. It's not new. It's not new for these countries. It's just that it's new now because of Ukraine that's highlighted what is happening. So, but underlying that, there are some fundamental agreements that we need to be looked at. And those,
I guess the kind of the current situation is highlighting complexities
Absolutely.
and problems that have existed for a long time.
Absolutely. Climate, supply chain.
And there are kind of very clear political channels that you have to go through in order to push and to lobby.
Absolutely.
I'm sure, Dale, you probably find that on the small scale as well in terms of kind of lobbying for change. And we had a question earlier about the links to kind of food banks and food poverty. And I was wondering if you could say something a bit about your work and how it links in with kind of current initiatives, and that kind of question that came from Gemma.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think I might be reading between the lines in my answer, but I mean, to answer the question directly, yes, we do engage with food banks and have food banks as part of our network, just as we have other community initiatives which are, you know, sort of more community fridges, community pantries, different models to meet food insecurity issues that are affecting communities. And I guess, yeah, the bit that I'm reading between the lines up here is you know, how do we move a system from kind of dealing with crises and focusing on how to deal with very real needs and urgent needs in terms of meeting food insecurity in a sort of crisis management mode, which perhaps you could argue food banks are an example of a solution that deals in that sort of crisis management response mode, to a kind of a real transformational change or a transition that actually does help us plan for a more sustainable food system in the future. And so I guess, you know, the way that we would do that is trying to look at solutions that are sort of both meeting the urgent food insecurity issues and responding to that sort of crisis, but also building towards a more fairer and equitable food system for the future. So as an example, the My Food Community programme, there are some food champions in there. One in particular I'm thinking of from Berry, who went back to her community and said, look, we think we need to do something different here and move away from increasing food bank usage to different models like food pantries and so on. So I think it's really, you know, food banks are so important right now, but if we can try and support the efforts that's going into that kind of response to be more transformational and help us build up the food system, a more sustainable food system for the future, I think that would be
yeah, thank you, Dan. I mean, it's something that I see a lot in my own work with Sustainable Thinking Scotland. Obviously, we work with a network of food banks in the Falkirk area, and growing, you know, fresh fruit and vegetables in order to supply the food banks, because an awful lot of the food that they get given it's really not nutritious. It's something that Deanna was speaking about before, and I wonder, Deanna, a couple of questions came in for you. One around how in your programme the 4 countries were chosen. But also I've got a question that ties in a little bit with something that Samira mentioned around best practice. Obviously, she's talking about it on a very big stage. And Dale was talking about it in terms of kind of best practice and community champions. And I was wondering if you could say something about the importance of those things in your project as well. So 1 about the geography and 2 about kind of community champions and best practice.
Yeah, no, thanks for those questions. Maybe I'll start with how we chose the countries. So yeah, obviously low intake of fruits and vegetables affects literally every country in the world except 1, I think, in Asia. And so we had every country to choose from, but you know, since we're using this kind of end-to-end approach, we wanted to choose some countries in which we could very effectively pilot the end-to-end approach. So we looked for countries where either the World Vegetable Center or the CG has a headquarters or has a, you know, hub of people working already, where we can easily implement activities, where we have existing relationships with governments and other stakeholders within each of the countries across the value chain. And also we wanted to include a couple of smaller countries where it might be more feasible to really test out that end-to-end approach in a more confined environment, which wouldn't involve as many, you know, political decisions about where and how we choose locations. So those were the main factors that went into choosing the locations. And of course, we wanted to have a little bit of a balance between Africa and Asia for this first 3 years. On the, identifying best practices, we've just started this initiative. Obviously, there's been a lot of research done in these areas around how to influence diets and dietary practices. There's lots done, around, specifically increasing fruit and vegetable intake, within low and middle income countries. So, one of the first things we're doing is a review, but we're also, having stakeholder meetings within each of the 4 focus countries to identify kind of what's going on in these countries, what are things that seem to be working. There's not as much published evidence on these different approaches, but there we will use that kind of combination of efforts to identify what we want to test in each of the different country contexts, and then hope to replicate and scale things that we identify as successful through rigorous evaluation. So yes, I'm very interested in the community approach and seeing if that might be something we use going forward. So thanks.
Well, I'm sure there's probably some tie-ins with Dale there, so maybe we'll connect you up.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
Cross-panel learning that I think.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Thank you.
Gemma, I was wondering, one of the things that you mentioned that actually none of the other panelists have mentioned, and it's about taste. You mentioned that one of the kind of key reasons that you can help, or one of the projects that you showcased to help with the uptake of nutrition and good food is to improve the taste of food and vegetables. And I'm sure that nobody would disagree about that, but I'm sure that you've heard a lot about the complexities about why there's a lack of kind of nutritional intake. But Gemma, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about scaling up of some of the initiatives that you talked about, because some of this research is obviously quite necessarily quite small scale, and if your work at CHAP helps to scale it up so that we do get this kind of level of transformational change that the other panelists were talking about.
Yeah, sure. So it's always challenging, and to be able to do anything like that, you need some sort of baseline data, and to understand that what you're trying to do is actually achievable, and it does work, it does produce the results that you're looking for. And we're fortunate that all our capabilities are able to do the sort of small scale projects, and some of them do have the ability to go a little bit larger than that. But to be able to sort of do the scale up side of things, it's creating those partnerships with companies and facilities that are larger than what we have ourselves, so that those things can be brought into reality. So we hope that some of our projects will be able to go that direction. But of course, the other thing that is a bit of a sticking point on this is the funding level. So who can we work with that is going to have the funds available to be able to do this scale up? So whether that's doing a sort of slightly larger project that's grant funded, for example, or whether we can work with nationals, multinationals that have a real invested interest in whatever we're trying to develop, so they can see the benefits of doing the work, and they have that sort of market pull at the end that can then sort of make it all possible along the line. So is the small scale what we've done got the good enough results, and to say yes, that's what it is, that's what can work, and actually we can pull through that production through to the end to make it available on a national scale. So lots of challenges in the way, but definitely can be done, and it's all about creating the right relationships for it.
Great, thank you, Gemma. I guess the kind of question that pops up in my mind about that is that whilst the big kind of commercial partnerships are usually necessary to help drive innovation, but also to help drive the commercialization and scale up, they're quite, certainly in the UK, they're very often the drivers of some of the food deserts and the difficulties that we have with highly processed foods as well. So it is a challenge, isn't it? It's walking a bit of a tightrope sometimes. A question that came in from Christian with a corollary from Mary Sunday, talking about across Africa why there is such a reliance on imported food when there are potential at least to be self-sustainable. I don't know whether you can talk to that, Samira.
Well, I have my own personal views, but I don't think it's something that one can one could say here. But this is why the resilient local food supply chains was so attractive when we launched that at the Food System Summit, because a number of countries saw that this is an opportunity for them, especially for what they've been saying all along, and now it's on the global stage, to focus on producing food. Now, a number of countries, the first things that they raised was, is this focused on self-sufficiency? How does this affect trade? This is why we are not covering the trade issues, because that's a big area that will come up. But about import substitution. So countries do want that, but they have also to manage their obligations to global agreements. They also have to, but I think fundamentally it's also high production costs and productivity, because the smallholder farmer is not incentivized to produce food when she can't transport the food to the markets if there's no infrastructure, if there's no electricity, if there's no post-harvest losses. So we know those issues, and now that it is on a global scale and it's being taken up, and as I say, there's now this pinpointing of the issues, because the Ukraine situation has thrown it all into stark relief. Then people are sort of thinking, well, yes, what people have been saying all along is what needs to be addressed. But it's not to be addressed to look at one crop. It's to look at a variety of healthy, nutritious, and good tasting crops that consumers will want to buy. It's to look at the wide variety of crops in these areas, but also looking at the areas that will increase production and productivity in the country. And in the countries, of course, industrialization and mechanization is also to follow. But these are long-term issues, and if they had been addressed, since the last crisis, we would have been somewhere by now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, whilst we could talk at length about all of these issues, and probably better to do so with a glass of wine in our hand, let's be honest. But what I would ask our panel members to do is, if you could, in the spirit of kind of best practice and success story sharing, if you could summarize in kind of 5 words what success looks like for each of your different kind of projects or the things that you're working on at the moment, what would you like to see happen in 5 years' time, in 5 words or less? Is that unfair of me to do so? Let's try anyway. Gemma, over to you. What does success look like for you?
Oh wow, put on the spot.
Sit the hot seat.
Yeah, so I guess for us it would be very much seeing those startup small companies, really innovative ideas that we're working with at the moment, and sort of in the next foreseeable, to go from that sort of small, it's a great idea, don't know where it's going, through to sort of commercial production, to get it onto UK and international farms, to make a difference in agriculture, to give the farmers what they need to do the job they're doing already, but much better and with much more support than they're getting at the moment.
See how brilliantly you did that? Wonderful. Dale, what about you?
I'm going to go for good food, leaderful communities.
Oh, very snappy. Deanna, can you match that?
Yeah, it's getting hard. I'll go for increased availability and affordability and intake of safe, sustainable fruits and vegetables.
Oh, wonderful. And over to you, Samira.
Well, mine would be 2 words, but it involves another thing. It's buy local, because but of course that means that farmers have to be supported. The policy environment has to be there. But if people are asked to buy local, because it stops as somebody told me that, to see imported onions next to the poor farmers' onions that are not as good as the imported ones, and not being sold. She doesn't have a sale because hers are not attractive. So it is to ensure that the local produce is attractive enough for people to buy. That is in the domain that we work. But the Food System Summit and resilient local food supply chains affect the whole world. I mean, even some European countries are talking about buying local.
Samira, these are the longest 5 words I've ever
Sorry.
heard. Super.
I did say buy local.
I have to say a massive thank you
Thank
to
you.
all of the panelists. I mean, that was just, we heard from such extraordinary work from all of you. So thank you very much for your time and energies and smarts and all of the efforts that you're putting in to make our world more sustainable, more equitable, and with more nutritious and tastier. Iffy, I'm going to pass over to Iffy, who now, I believe, has a showcase of some of the agri-food techpreneurs before we then go to a quick break.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Fantastic moderation and fantastic speakers. Thank you, Samira, Gemma, Dale, and Diana. Those were very insightful presentations that we've listened to. And I think coming to what I want to say, I think we really, in a situation where we have to take a very holistic approach to ensure that we can provide access to good food for all. Now, the World Bank Commodity Outlook has warned that many foods are set to see steep rises in their course. This is largely because of the triple shocks of the coronavirus pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and climate change. Now, the coronavirus pandemic has massively distorted the supply chain, making it very difficult to transfer food supply, as well as limiting the availability of labor within the food system due to the restriction on travels affecting the often seasonal workers that support agri-food production. The coronavirus pandemic exposed the fragility of our food system. And then the Russia and Ukraine crisis, as so many of the presenters have spoken about, has actually exacerbated the situation that we have at hand. How do we solve this problem? How do we ensure that as we celebrate World Sustainable Gastronomy Day 2022, how do we ensure that we can get more food, good food, to more people in the most sustainable way? This is a cross of what we do at IntelliDigest. Now, IntelliDigest has been pioneering sustainable food production. We develop technology innovation. We also are engaged in capacity building to ensure the stakeholders in the food system, from farm to fork, are equipped with the necessary resources and tools to be able to address global challenge we have within the food system. Now, think of it. What is this global sustainability food challenge? We know that 1 in 5 deaths is linked to malnutrition. Most people are not aware of that because we don't have an understanding that the food we eat has got huge impact on our health. And because we currently consuming food that don't have the right nutritious value, that means we exposing our body to different challenges and health challenges. So what we do at IntelliDigest is bringing back that information, bringing back that knowledge to people, creating equipment and solutions that can help to ensure that people have a better understanding about the impact of the food they eat on their health and also on their environment. Please do check IntelliDigest.com, www.intellidigest.com, to learn more about some of the solutions that we have. I'm just going to highlight one of them, which I'm really passionate about and that we're keen for everyone to please sign up for, which is the World Food Tracker. We provide a tool for you to be able to plan your meal, and because you plan your meal, then you ensure that you have the right balance of food in your meal, right balance of nutrition in your meal. And because you do that, the local food producers can plan the way they grow food so they can grow it more sustainably and make it available to you. It also is also helping the wider food system supply chain to ensure that we can drive forward this food system sustainability. A lot of this is very much linked to so many of the presentations that we had today. And we're very keen for you to be part of this because each and every one of us, we do have a role to play. But then the next thing I'm going to share with you is a very exciting program which we've been able to deliver with support from the Royal Bank of Scotland and NatWest, which have been huge supporter of what we do to be able to run the Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program. And also, we also work with STFC Food Network, which is also part of the UK research innovation. So we really excited about the impact the global agri-food techpreneur program is delivering and is going to continue to deliver in the future. Now, what is Global Agri-Food Techpreneur Program? It's a very specially designed program to support young graduates to engage with the food system, because ultimately the young graduates need to be able to participate and they contribute their knowledge to help us drive this change in our society. We're not just going to leave it for the local farmers who may not have the required skill sets and ability to be able to uptake these technologies and work with them. We need young people, young graduates who've got the expertise, who have got the knowledge to be able to contribute that in making the food system more sustainable. And we're pleased to be working with some of these young graduates. More importantly, we did run this program, and when we opened it up, we had over 100 applications that were submitted, but we had some of these applicants who are very dedicated throughout the program, who will be graduating from the program today. And we're so pleased to see the transformation that took place as they engage with this program. First of all, being able to engage with Royal Bank of Scotland, the business builder platform, and being able to take the knowledge from there, engage with the workshops there, but also attended the 6-week masterclass where they were able to understand so many things about technology, about innovation, about entrepreneurship, and more importantly, about food system sustainability. And we're so pleased for the transformation and impact this particular program already delivered for these young graduates. And we're looking forward to working with more young graduates. We set a target of 1,000 global agri-food techpreneurs to work with in the future. Now, the applications spanned across the globe. And we're so pleased to have those over 100 applications this year, and we're expecting over 1,000 applications next year across the globe. And we work with these young graduates to ensure that they understand the importance of food system sustainability and ensuring that good food can get to more people in the future in the most sustainable way. So now I'm just gonna move on to showcase some of these young graduates who engage with us, what they said about the program, and also what they do within the food system. So thank you so much for being part of this program today. And we're really keen for you to continue to support the young graduates. If there's any of them that you feel your organization can support, please do get in touch with us, because we want to be able to link them more up with more support to continue to do the great work they're doing within the food system. Thank you.
Fourth Republic Housing Estate, Lokoja, Nigeria. Our aim is supporting one of the Sustainable Development Goals of ending hunger and malnutrition. Do you know that over 25,000 people, including 10,000 children, die of hunger daily, while estimated 854 million people worldwide are malnourished according to the Global Hunger Index? Developing countries like Africa, the stats are alarming. That's why the company is working tirelessly to produce food and the nutritious component of the food called fish. Since the inception of the company in 2018, we have been recording 30% increase in production and sales annually. This has helped us to reduce unemployment and increase our GDP. We are appealing for the grant support of $6,000 to enable us increase our farm size, employ more competent and get some advanced tech farm equipment, which will all help us to improve production and increase our capacity. Thank you.
Who are hungry and malnourished in Nigeria. The ban of imported poultry products also created a market gap of 1.2 million metric tons of broiler meat. Broiler farming is the quickest solution to solve protein malnutrition, but low production capacity hinders 85 million smallholder poultry farmers from accessing the large broiler market. Our business, a finance and marketing scheme, is standing in the gap for more than 2,000 broiler farmers to take advantage of the huge consumer market in our first year of operation. The process frozen broiler will be made visible in retail shops for distribution to final consumers. As a commercial farmer of more than 12 years and acting in the capacity of the production and operations manager, I'll be teaming up with a marketing officer, a sales accounting officer, a social media officer, a sales assistant, a bus driver, and 4 unskilled workers. I'm pitching for a grant of £42,233.62 to fabricate a cheesing processing plant and do several other things time will not permit me to mention.
Astounding 7.3%. Now if we narrow it to only turmeric, ginger and onion, It's 1350,000 metric tons, 80 billion rupees. I experienced this problem for 2 decades as a farmer. Something needed to be done about this. This is how my startup S4 Foods was found. Myself, Sushil Shelke. My team comprises of Dr. Sanjay Boyar, scientific advisor, and 2 directors, Sarjarao Shelke and Sindhu Shelke. We partnered with Agricultural University and designed an integrated processing line that helps overcome the vagaries of climate, especially unannounced monsoons. We set up working concept pilot plant by investing 1 crore of our own money. Fresh rhizome to saleable powder products are made 100% in-house now, eliminating sun drying. We hope you partner with us in order to promote our technology to farmers' community who will be able to minimize their losses through their enterprise and make rhizome farming beneficial. Thank you.
Program was really wonderful because the 6 weeks that we had was mind-blowing and explosive. Based on it, really elevated my thinking, and so many things that I do come across, like my daily challenges when I come up with the questions and my questionnaires into the class, then they'll do justice to it, and my answers will be given to me perfectly. And it has really helped me to scale up my thinking. It has really helped me in the area of building up more experience in my business. It has really been impactful.
I have learned many things during the program, and I will list my takeaway. My takeaways, I will list them one by one. 1, the courses are inspiring, they are eye-opening, and they are motivating. While taking the courses, it increased my level of confidence and enabled me to believe in the reality and the beauty of my dreams. 3, the courses enabled me to believe that while having a growth mindset and while working locally, I can be thinking globally. With the courses, that's 4, it will enable us to build enduring and sustainable businesses in Africa. The courses taught me how I can work in partnership with other stakeholders. 6, while undergoing the courses, I saw the importance of having an accountant or an accounting consultant. 7, the courses helped me to keep thinking ahead, to have a clear vision of the future, and to provide a sense of purpose and direction for my business. It helped me to paint a clear picture of the ideal future and to give me the clarity and focus to get there. I was also able to attract new customers. Another point is that it was wonderful discussing with other entrepreneurs from other countries. We were able to know the peculiarities of how businesses are run in each of those countries.
The program was fantastic over the 6 weeks. It was a deep engagement, especially through the RBS Builder program, wherein every week a new topic was undertaken, and as in when the weeks progressed, the level of advancement on these topics enhanced. We could take practical insights from these learnings. Some of them were like we never indulged into the mindset phenomena, how it could enhance our strategy. And secondly was the risk management. So we took a very true, clear worldview when we progressed. And unfortunately, during the last 2 years, the business was affected due to the COVID problems. And means if we would have taken this course 2 years earlier, we would have been in a better position. But we have taken the learnings from the course, and we will be able to plan ourselves better in the case of risk mitigation, risk management, which was a very integral part of this course.
I will really suggest that everyone should take advantage of this wonderful innovation that is happening. Every time we think about agri, the new trend now is bringing innovation and technology into agri. So for such a program coming up, if please you have to hear about this program, you need to log into it, register for it, and go through this program. Go through these 6 weeks. It's going to be impactful. It's going to be mind explosive. In fact, myself, as I am right now, I think for the next program, like maybe when another program comes up again, I would definitely register to get more knowledge on it again. It has been really wonderful, and I urge you all to come and register and know what's happening here. It's going to impact you a lot.
For future participants, I will encourage they take the program very serious, because most young ones believe that any online programs is a scam. I will encourage they work on their mindset by having a growth mindset.
I will definitely recommend this program. Firstly, coming from the tech pioneers from Europe, a lot of case studies that are global case studies. And that's why this is a very important course. And in the future, everything will be correlated to the sustainability, to the sustainable developmental goals. And hence, any entrepreneur, any startup who is starting and wants to have a global outlook, this is a fantastic program for them.
Oh, hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good. Yes.
Great. Thank you very much for switching around our speaker agenda and coming to the rescue.
Yeah, that's the life of a farmer.
Super. Well, I'm really excited to hear your presentation. Yes, you do have slides. Excellent.
Yes, but I'm not ready for them just yet. I'll just...
No worries. I will, you get yourself ready. I'll give you a little introduction.
Yes, so if you could just take out the slide, that would be great. Thank you.
So everybody, please welcome to the stage Jillian Goddard, who is the convener and co-founder of the Cross-Atlantic Chocolate Collective, which sounds unbelievable. I mean, it just sounds so delicious. It's making me dribble already. This is an organization dedicated to eliminating the gap between cocoa growers and chocolate makers by sharing their information, insight, skills, support, and encouragement. Their innovative model enables members to cultivate the fruit, process the beans, temper the couverture, and sell their own chocolate. Jillian is also the owner of Sun Eaters Organics, which grows and develops agro-processing protocols specific to local inputs, then transfers these protocols to rural communities. Jillian is experienced, she is an experienced organic farmer, and she's skilled in biochar production. Gosh, how cool. I don't often find that many people there that are into their biochar. I'm excited to talk about that. And also polyculture, agroforestry, and artisanal agro-processing, and the development of organic agriculture businesses. Jillian, if you're ready, I will ask you to take to the stage with your slides.
Okay, well, before you read what's on the slide, I wanted to just underline that my take-home message today is that a healthy ecosystem, when closely observed, gives us many, if not most, of the answers to our sustainability questions. In other words, if you look around you, find a healthy ecosystem, and you analyze it, you will see answers to most of your questions. It is more sophisticated, complex, long-lived, and consistent than most current human ecosystems when they are taken and studied in isolation. But this is a big leap, right, in philosophy and practice, especially for those in the global north. So it's a big leap from where many of us are currently functioning, right? So what I want to do in my 15 minutes is to talk a little bit and give you a tiny snapshot of how that looks in practice, how following that philosophy actually looks in practice, and a snapshot of the ecosystems in which I operate within overlapping communities and what we have learned and are replicating. So this is the same thing that I just said, but in different words. So to reestablish a sustainable food system, which we have to assume, if you take the broad sweep of history, the fact that humans survived means we had a food system that actually worked for us. And the fact that we had increasing biodiversity over time means that it was also working for other species. So it requires a few foundational principles. The mantra for me and for the organizations that I work in is do as the forest does. Don't have to necessarily go to business texts, but you do have to learn to read healthy ecosystems. What does that mean? That our fundamentals are based on community, past, present, and future, and that doesn't only include humans. Diversity, human and non-human, of and within sub-ecosystems, and planned redundancies. So these basic principles allow for agility, cycling, and lots of other exciting sustainable qualities. Next slide, please. So what I'm mainly going to do is show you pretty pictures, because with a lot of information which you've already had for the day, I think that by looking at images, we can actually learn certain things. So this is where I farm and some of my neighbors. And when you look at a farm like this, you shouldn't really be able to see the farm clearly. This is a system of a managed forest. And so you'll see a bit more of this, and we'll talk more about it in the time. So I personally have a brand called Sanita's Organics, and I make chocolate in that brand, but I make a lot of other processed products. And as was said in the introduction, when I master a product, I pass it on to my wider community. I also participate in activist circles, local and international, because in order to create the shift that I'm discussing here, we have to be talking with each other and reasoning. I operate an 11-acre managed forest with my partner. And during COVID, we kind of speeded things up a bit because we haven't had possession of it for that long to be able to ensure that we could be food self-sufficient. I also plant in a 5,000 square foot urban backyard, and you'll see that in a bit. And I do intense personal re-indigenization and anti-colonial studying and idea sharing. I'll talk a bit as we move through about the two main organizations that I work within. So this is what, in the tropical zone, a healthy managed forest would look like, which would mainly include perennials. And if you read the data from indigenous groups, land-based societies that survived for a very long time, in Central America, the data is clear that 10% might be dedicated to annuals and managed, and the rest of it was perennials and food crops for humans and food crops for other species, and also needs for timber, needs for clothing, and everything else that pretty much you would need, you would find here, except a small amount of trade that is seen throughout history. Next slide, please. So this is me in the urban backyard. It's a tiny lot, 5,000 square feet. My brother actually lives next door, so we share a backyard and garden in the backyard together. And you're able to do more concentrated activity in a small space like this, and this would prioritize annuals. Next slide, please. So I want to just show you some faces now of the people that I collaborate with. This is the latest collaboration, and this is the Cross-Atlantic Chocolate Collective. We started casually last year in August, myself, which is in the upper left, reaching out to Wezi in Malawi, who is the two away from me in the top row in the white shirt, and just chatting with each other. She was farming cocoa in Malawi, and I reached out to her and said, hey, you want to learn to make chocolate? And she was already a bit on the journey, so we worked together. The group now is about 9 months old, and we have people from 9 African countries, 5 Caribbean countries, a US African Heritage Network that links with us. So in a sense, it's a bit of a Pan-African cocoa and chocolate network. We're self-funded so far, And we put out a sample product 3 months after we started. Of course, that was pretty complicated. We had to buy small machines, ship them to about half of the countries. About half of us were already making chocolate in the global south. And we had to figure out networks, put it online, sell it. And in our first rounds, we sold $15,000 in US dollars in the sampler, which was just a test product. So I'm just going to run through the countries pretty quickly from me going across. Not the next slide yet. So that's Naomi from Tanzania. We have Malawi, Uganda, Grenada, Jamaica, Dominica, west coast of the US, and Afro-Latina from Honduras, then Nigeria, Uganda, Zambia, Cameroon, Ghana, and another US ally. But the group has more people than you see here, but this is basically part of what ended up in the box. Next slide, please. So how did that happen? Well, about 7 years ago, I was processing and realized that most of the cocoa products in Trinidad, which had been one of the biggest exporters of chocolate in the world, was importing most of its cocoa products. There were 2 people making small-scale chocolate, but I realized, okay, this is not working the way that it is. I used to have an organic shop. The organic shop became a cooperative, and I got together, called my friends in different villages, said, okay, send some people. I'm learning to make chocolate. Let's learn it together. And so now this is part of the group, and what you'll see between the faces is different forms of cocoa, chocolate. I'll talk a bit more about the way that it's set up in a bit, but we've reached a point now, we have an NGO to ensure that we have the capacity to support the LTD company, which does distribution, marketing. We have a shop and a cafe, and we also have a conservation NGO, because without a healthy ecosystem, this is not going to work. We have a CSA, which was incredibly helpful because during COVID, all our tourism money from chocolate and cocoa went away, and we were able to rapidly scale up and maintain our revenue. We're in 4 villages in the Caribbean, in Trinidad, 2 in St. Lucia. We have an affiliate in Guyana, an on and off group in Tobago, and then we interact pretty heavily with the national urban setting. Next slide, please. We have a lot of sub-activities in order to keep this healthy. And once again, this is going with the model of how a forest operates with some subsections and subclimatic zones. So this is a PGS. It's a locally run certification system where instead of using a third-party certifier, we certify each other's produce. And what the advantages to this is that we also meet regularly, we chat together, we have Zoom calls now because of COVID. This all started during COVID. And we support each other with farming, and we plan out what we're going to plant for the CSA system. And we focus heavily on perennial eating, even though in the pictures I noticed that it was mainly our annual crops. But it's not easily possible to maintain sustainability with a heavy emphasis on annuals. And that's a place where I see the gastronomy sector can really go astray, because it's not in the interest of farmers for most of our food to come from annuals. Next slide, please. So we get together, we farm together, we learn about different things. We do biochar workshops, composting workshops. We talk about indigenous farming. We talk about permaculture and how that comes out of the indigenous system and what are the parts we want to keep and not keep. So this is a really supportive community-based way for us to have chemical-free farming, and mainly in that case using on-farm inputs. Next slide, please. This was a class we did with a group in Denmark where we sent some chocolate to them and then spoke with them about food systems, and they created a zine. So why this? Now, in most natural ecosystems, you'll see that there are visitors. There are migratory birds. There is water that comes from other places. So it's pretty natural in a forest ecosystem for there to be some larger global interaction, not just local. And so that's one of the things. Yes, we are focused on local, but particularly where the healing of the ecosystem is required, we utilize global systems to to re-even out and create equity in resources. So this is one of the ways that we do it, teaching classes and giving chats to people and explaining what our situation and talking a lot about Global South, Global North equity. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges with projects that look like little projects is that because the ecosystem is actually designed in a way that creates obstacles for the little projects, we end up having to create entire ecosystems. So I'm sharing with you our current organizational diagram for Cross Atlantic. You would think, looking at the brown circle in the top, that's the producer hive. You want to make chocolate and be able to make a decent living instead of the situation that currently exists, which is incredibly exploitative and is not really possible for most farmers to live on what they make. Well, you got to produce. So it would seem that would be, okay, let's do skills transfer, but it doesn't quite work like that. So we've created a kind of a mothership where we sit down and we work on designing these types of plans. Right now, we actually have incorporated in the United States. We have to do open bank accounts. We have to send machines to each other. We have to think about funding. So far, the project is completely self-funded, and the ARC project is minimally externally funded because as a farmer, I know that you cannot sustain resources from the outside indefinitely. So you really have to make sure that any resources coming from outside, you're able to multiply them easily and use that to keep yourself going. So in this drawing, from the mothership where a lot of the decisions are made, we're set up as a cooperative. We develop the producer hive. We're going to have to move some of that material, right? Because there isn't currently economic equity in the global north and south. So for chocolate, we are developing a system with alternative transport, which will probably take 3 to 4 years, where we're developing a cooperative to use sailboats and alternatively fueled, non-fossil fueled ships. We have a chocolatier hive, that's the big purple circle down at the bottom. So we are training chocolatiers, mainly African heritage at present, in the United States to then take our product and take it to the final stage. We are developing the wholesale network, so we already have the product in some shops. We are eventually developing a cafe network. And then we also, from the sales ship, you'll see we have direct sales. So we have a website, easy to remember, called chocolaterebellion.com. So if you forget, just try and remember those two words together, chocolaterebellion.com. And that shows the work in the Caribbean and also the global work. And on the upper left, you'll see experiences network, because what has become clear in chocolate is that that's where the profit lies. Next slide, please. I think this may be the final slide. So in this slide, what you see is rekindling of the indigenous ways of using cocoa. Chocolate really came about during chocolate as we know it came about during the colonial period, because the last stage of chocolate making, you require temperatures below 20 degrees C to be able to temper the chocolate. So yes, we make chocolate, but we also utilize other things. We mix cocoa with corn, which is very traditional, with ruku or achiote, with the leaf up on the top, which is an Oha Santa leaf. And now that about 70% of the cocoa is grown within the continent of Africa, mainly in Cote d'Ivoire and Ghana, we both have people from both countries in our network. We are also going to incorporate those ingredients. So this is the end of the slide. So you can actually close that off and I come back on the main screen.
Wow, Jillian, that was a tour de force. I'm blown away by your, by just you, I think, and then bringing all these fantastic people together and what you're up to. This is absolutely incredible stuff. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm really looking forward to speaking to you a bit more in the Q&A section. I'm going to do a swift move on to Claire Hill, who I will invite up to the stage now. Claire Hill is the Regenerative Agricultural Director at FAI Farms. She's working with food businesses such as Arla, McDonald's and IKEA on their regenerative pilots and programs. Her latest project is the development of a model farm in Shropshire, aiming to bring vibrancy to family farms through regenerative agriculture. She started the transition of FAI's 1,200-acre farm from organic to regenerative production in 2019. achieving Savory Institute Ecological Outcome Verification in 2020. Claire and her team have been through a transformation in the way that they make decisions and the approach of management of the farm. It's this practical experience of managing regeneration which helps her lead others in this process.
So I'll just talk a little bit about FAI Farms, just to start with really briefly, is we help food brands improve their supply chains, whether that be animal welfare, sustainability, or in this new world, in regeneration. And the way in which we do that is through a through a number of different ways. One is strategic business advice. We've got data systems, and we've got a team of experts. We've got people that are farmers, vets, supply chain experts, and the kind of collaboration of all that information together from kind of real people from the supply chain helps food businesses transition. Can Theo just, I need to see an email address. I can't work it out because I have to do that in order to be able to share it. Sorry, I'm trying to multitask here. Would someone be able to, if someone can just post the email address that I need to share it with in the chat, that would be great. Many people wonder what is regenerative agriculture? I don't know if everyone's familiar with it. We have this conversation endlessly about what it is, and the way in which we describe it is a what is it? It's a system that mimics nature, a farming system that mimics nature. And we often think that we're already doing that when we're in amongst nature on a farm, but actually in the way we're often trying to control nature. We're often trying to control weeds. We're often trying to like get rid of things because we want to get rid of some things and not others, and keep the plants that we want. And so what we're aiming to do with regenerative agriculture is take the power of nature and harness that and mimic what she does. So for example, if I see thistles in my livestock field, I don't think how do I get rid of those thistles? I think, that's interesting. Why have I got thistles? What's the meaning of them? And how do I adjust my management in order to kind of have the thistles there, let them do their job, and get rid of, and eventually they'll go because the soil biology will change. So thistles, for example, have a really deep tap root compared to grasses, which tend to be like this in the way we currently manage them anyway. And so actually when you've got a lot of thistles, you've probably got compaction. So it's actually Mother Nature's way of saying we've got compaction. So now when I see thistles in the field, we think, okay, we need to manage that area for compaction rather than how do I kill the thistles as quickly as possible. Can you drop the link in the chat here? It's not recognizing your email address for some reason. So I shall carry on. Here we go. Right. And one thing I should have said about FAI actually is that we are at the center of everything we do. So we do all the big corporate stuff and we work with all the brands, but actually we have a farm, a 1,200 acre farm, and just outside Oxford. It's a mixed livestock and arable farm. And that is the farm whereby I guess I gained my experience and understanding about what regenerative systems were, in that, as you said, we transitioned from organic to organic regenerative. And I thought that when we first set out that, well, we're already organic, we must be doing the best, that doesn't get better than this when it comes to biodiversity and soil, etc. But I learned a lot. And often in our organic systems, we are just kind of mimicking conventional methodologies, but without the chemicals. And so that's something that I've kind of really learned, but also just to say that we've got the farm there at the center of what we do. So I'm just going through my slides, and I'm going to wait for some of the pictures to come. But why, I guess, just the background as to why we are doing what we're doing, to remind ourselves, although we don't really need a reminder here, but just that if we look at Johan Rockstrom's work and the Planetary Boundaries, we spend most of our time at the moment talking about climate change as being our biggest worry and our biggest threat, whereas actually we've already way surpassed the planetary boundary for biodiversity loss and also for nitrogen cycling. And as farmers, we are kind of one of the kind of key industry groups, I guess, that can have some control and influence over the amount of biodiversity we have in our landscape and the way that nitrogen is used, or preferably not used in artificial forms anymore. And so it's just recognizing that 50% of the usable land in the world is used for food production, and therefore farmers have great opportunity. But we often hear in the food industry that, oh yeah, we've got the answers, we've got the land, whereas without the recognition that change needs to happen. And so that's what I work on, I guess, is that helping recognize what change is needed. Now, are you? Yes, you're on my slides. Amazing. So that's the farm. Fast forward to the next slide, please. Planetary boundaries. We can see, and just that quote from Johan, what we do between 2020 and 30 will be the decisive decade for humanity's future on Earth, which often when I put that up for farmers, they're a bit like, ooh, that's a bit much. But I think sometimes it's important that we all recognize the role that we have to play. Next slide, please. So this is that's the big kind of Johan's work is the big global why it's important. And this is the why it's important on our farm and increasingly on farms, you know, across the world, but even in the UK, we're facing climate extremes. To start with, it was just, oh, it's a bad year, it's a wet year, it's a dry year. Now every winter is the wettest winter on record, and every summer tends to be the driest, or every spring. And we're seeing this move away from the predictable climates that we thought we'd see. And of course, when you've got this happening on your farm, then that is much more difficult to deal with and affects the way that we plan. I love the title of this conference being about planning, because one thing that I think that we don't necessarily do in farming enough is plan well, or design. We don't use design. We just kind of do what we like, if we like cattle farming or dairy farming, or we do what our family did. We're not necessarily looking at the landscape and the ecosystem and thinking, how do I best mimic nature in this area in order to make the best from it. So that's just a really for me, it was really interesting that the title of the conference was about planning. But if we go to the next slide, so this was one of my defining moments. That you can see that wet picture previously was pretty common on our farm now. 50% of our farm, so 600 acres, goes under every winter now, and it used to be like 1 in 10 winters. Now it is every winter for multiple belts of time. It might dry up for a bit, but the rain comes back and then we go under again. And then it was a couple of years ago at lambing, which is in April, and we'd had the wettest winter on record, and the farm had looked like the previous slide. And then at lambing in April, it looked like this, and all the cracks were on the ground already. And I was like, where has all the water gone? So that's when I realized that we needed to do something different about the way in which we managed our land. Next slide, please. Oh, so I've skipped around a bit, but just regenerative agriculture, a system of farming principles and practices that increase biodiversity, enrich soil, improve watersheds, and enhance ecosystem services. I think I've said a bit about that, so we move on to the next one. So how do we do it? What are we doing differently? Majority of, well, we changed our grazing management. I mean, we did lots of other learning about holistic thinking and everything else, but in the main, practically on the ground, what do we do differently? We graze differently. So we used to set stock graze where the animals were turned out and would be in fields for weeks at a time. We did actually go through a transition then to rotational grazing, and where we were moving animals around more quickly. They were in. We split the field using electric fences into smaller cells, and they were in those fields for only a day or two, but we would cycle them back round quite quickly. So we were trying to maximize the utilization of the grass that we got. And we grew a lot more grass. Like, it was a really good system, productivity wise, less inputs. And we see that consistently across farms that implement this, even when they're not organic. They're using less fertilizer, less bought in feed, and can increase their stocking rate. So that is a great sustainable, a better, more sustainable grazing system, because you can get more from less without the usual sustainable intensification model that you need to get more from less. But what we've done is taken that a step further and moved to regenerative or adaptive multi-paddock grazing, or holistic plan grazing for those that are familiar with the Savory Institute. And adaptive multi-paddock grazing is effectively a large group of animals in a small area of land for a short period of time, followed by a long rest period. And the idea is that we mimic the behavior of buffalo and bison when they roamed, where they wouldn't come back and keep regrazing the same land. They would move on to somewhere else in search of water or more food. And that land would get an intensive graze, trampling organic matter back into the soil, feeding the soil microbes with urine and dung, and then leaving it for a really long time to let it really rest and recover, because we know that what's above the ground in grass length is below the ground in root length. So when we're constantly grazing grass like this, like we mow our lawns, we only ever have short roots, and we need deeper roots for better water infiltration, better mining of minerals, etc., etc. It's better overall soil health. Next slide, please. I'm conscious I'm running out of time. So I was just going to say on this picture is that, so this is a better example of a mob. They're standing all together. We don't keep them that tight. They've got about 10 times that space to roam in, but they're all stood together on that day, probably because we're about to move them into the next cell. My key reason for showing this slide is that often when we're talking to farmers, they don't like it because it looks messy. And this is one of the mindset shift elements that we need to get our head around when we're thinking about systems that mimic nature. Nature doesn't do neat. It doesn't do straight lines. Nature does messy because it's about lots of interactions. So I show this slide quite often just to show this long grass, and most farmers have a heart attack over it. But we graze that and we leave about 50% of that material behind because it acts as solar panels to grow more grass, and it keeps the ground covered to prevent evaporation. Next slide, please. And then this is just another one to talk about what we mean by, I guess, sustainable and regenerative. And we kind of look at it as this sliding scale, because I don't think there is any end destination. We don't really know what it means to be, when do you get the tick to say that you are fully regenerative, or you know that you can do no more. I don't know if we'll ever get there. I know that what we know, there are lots of signs that we can look for the land to be regenerating, and we kind of we're just trying to encourage everybody to move up this scale. What's quite interesting is that when you put this up sometimes and ask people to pitch where they think they are now, in the main, even in organic farming, we are in this sort of lower conventional nature friendly block there. There's very few farms that have actually achieved net zero, and in the main we're in this kind of making space for nature paradigm where we say we're going to do farming here and nature over here, whereas in regenerative agriculture we're saying, well, why don't we just do nature everywhere but also do productivity everywhere, because actually nature is very productive if you kind of work with it rather than against it. So in the main, what we're doing when we're talking about transitioning people to being regenerative, it's just slowly making small steps or some large steps up the scale to a system that is summarized as putting back more than it takes out, because in the main, most of our systems at the moment are still extractive in their nature. Not intentionally, not that farmers get up in the morning to think, today I'm going to mine my soil, but just the system that we've been kind of told is best practice, and the focus on yield and everything else has led us to end up in that position. Next slide, please. So coming back to my point about planning, I love this. I love that question. What are we planning for? And I think maybe definitely, I don't think maybe. What we need to move from is planning for yield, and we need to move to planning for health. I heard talks earlier about flavour and taste, and we lay that up as well with nutrient density. There's increasing research to show that most of our food now doesn't have the nutrient level in it that it used to, because of intensive agriculture has kind of stripped out the soil health, and therefore that has reduced the nutrient density of our food. And if we as farmers just, and the whole food supply chain just targeted ourselves on health per hectare or nutrient density per hectare, how that would change the face of our farming system, because our monocultures would go away and we would end up with layered stack systems. So imagine the top field without the sprayer, but with trees and growing fruit and shrubs and possibly nuts, but also timber and browse for animals. And you could have cattle, sheep, poultry, all of those things stacked in that space. So we often think about yield at the moment is about like how many of one thing can we get from that field. Actually, we'd be like, how many layers of things can we get? And when we do that, we have great interactions with within the soil. We don't tend to need the disease control chemicals, and therefore the overall quality of the product goes up. And Vandana Shiva sort of my semi-hero at the moment. Follow her work really closely. I love everything she does, but she's the one I just wanted to give her credit here for coining the health per acre rather than yield per acre. And I just think it's something that would be transformational if the food system took up that as a measure. Next slide, please. And I think it's my last one, so we're nearly there. But what are we currently planning for? Most companies that I work with are planning for carbon. And the one thing that I always put up is this slide to just say we just need to make sure that we focus on everything else that's happening and not just carbon. Now, carbon is a really good lens into everything else. Better soil, healthier soil tends to have more carbon in it. So that's a good thing. But also that if we just focus on carbon and carbon targets, then we kind of forget everything else that's happening. Good example would be in livestock production. It would look at them, if you did a pure carbon footprint, it would look like intensive chicken is better than cattle, for example, but actually cattle is part of an ecosystem interacting with that landscape like we're doing on our farm, and that you're getting lots of ecosystem services coming from that. Then you're not getting that when you've got a chicken in a shed eating soya and grain from everywhere else. They might look very efficient and it might be very good from a carbon emissions point of view, but it doesn't sell the whole picture. And in fact, the report from the Sustainable Food Trust that came out this week talked about actually starting for the first time I've seen that acknowledged somewhere that actually beef and ruminant animals at the same level, but a lesser consumption of pork and chicken in the intensive systems will be better for overall what we're seeing. And then I think one more quick slide. Is that my last one? That might be my last one. Yeah. Oh no, just this one. And one key message, I guess, for me is at the moment I spend a lot of time with people talking about system tweaks. So it's like, oh, well, if we just change that, or we just change this little thing, we need to get our heads around the fact. I think that we need a system shift. And I love to show this slide, which just shows that one thing that we can do is to cover soil. And if we cover soil, look at the temperature difference. Therefore that leads to better productivity. Yeah. And what does regenerative business look like? Because we often talk about regenerative farming, but actually we all need to think differently. And that is about food businesses throughout the supply chain.
Super. Thank you so much, Claire. That was fascinating. A huge amount of food for thought, very much so. But you haven't heard that one before. And a lot of links there with what Jillian was talking about before. So I think we're going to have a really vibrant Q&A. Thank you so much, Claire. That was really fascinating. And thank you for persevering and multitasking.
Yes.
For the talk. Absolutely stellar work there. I will invite Iffy to the stage now, who's going to talk a bit more about the work of IntelliDigest. Hiya, Iffy. Nice of you to join us on the stage. I'll just give you a little introduction. So Iffy is, first and foremost, my friend. But more importantly, she holds a PhD in environmental engineering, and she is the founder and CEO of IntelliDigest, a company that's really on a mission to empower global food sustainability, eliminate food waste and zero hunger, and improve access to nutrition for everyone through technology innovation and capacity building. IntelliDigest applies cutting-edge technology such as artificial intelligence and enzyme engineering to make the food system more sustainable by eliminating edible food waste and converting inedible food waste at the earliest possible time to bionutrients and sustainable chemicals for the food system. As you heard earlier, Iffy also does a lot of work in capacity building and she is developing the Food Industry Sustainability Index to help businesses in the food sector transition to a more sustainable economy. And as we heard from the video earlier, she runs the Agri-Food Techpreneur Club, which enables young people to build their entrepreneurial and finance skills in sustainable agriculture. Iffy, I shall let you take the stage.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Steph. I think we've had quite very impressive presentations today, and quite insightful in the sense that it will stir up a lot of thinking in what we do and how we engage with the food system. But I think I'm very pleased to have this opportunity to share some of the insights of what we do at IntelliDigest. First of all, looking at the global inflation rate, which have risen since 2020, we know that we face in a situation where we need to help people have access to good food in the most sustainable way, because fundamentally people are struggling with being able to access the food they need to eat, because in the midst of this inflation, there's so many other things that's demanding for the resources, the limited resources that they have. So my question will be, what is the state of our food system today? So currently, as Steph did provide insight in when we started, I'm currently based in the UK. And if I think about what's the state of food system in the UK, I know that 1 million UK adults go entire day. That's the news. Without food in cost of living crisis. That comes back again to the inflation issue that we have. We've also, been aware that based on climate change issues, there's been outbreak of avian flu, which meant that most of the chicken we're not able to be allowed to be free range, which means that they have to be caged, and that means we no longer have free range eggs in the UK, and that is really a big problem. Chicken will cost more because of Ukraine crisis, says Minister, warning of 8% food inflation. War in Ukraine will lead to food price rises, and that's something that's come up so much in the conversation we had today about the impact of the current war and crisis on the overall food supply chain. The 3 F's why UK farmers fear the soaring cost of fertilizer, feed, and fuel. This very much connects with most of what Clay is talking about, what we need to take on regenerative agricultural practices, because then farmers will become more reliable. They won't have to be reliable on having to bring in a lot of feed into the farm, but they can actually sustain the farm more efficiently. And I think this also came out in terms of what Jillian did say about how they are engaging with the chocolate factory. I think there's a lot of issues around obesity and why we need to, be able to manage ultra-processed foods and junk food and how much of that we consume. Very controversial topic, indeed, in this case. Then the cost of living crisis, line on food handouts and moving countries, still coming back to that impact of inflation and how much we can access food. Cost of, living rise in food export, costs, packs, concerns. Now, these are some of the food sustainability challenges we have currently within the UK, where I'm currently based at the moment. For me, I think just to help us bring in some stimulation in the conversation, I would like you to just put in a chart, what is the state of the food system in your country? What was the biggest challenge you are witnessing around the food system, where you are, where you're staying, or some of the countries that you visited? What are the food system challenges that you are kind of come across and witness? I'll just give us some few seconds to think about it. Just a moment of reflection on what the food system means for us within our society and where we live. Just want to see some things popping up in the chart. I think the more we understand these challenges, the more it becomes, easier for us to take personal actions and also corporate actions to be able to address these challenges, rather than making it, for us to see it as this is a problem and there isn't anything I can do. I think the more we think about it, the more we have a sense of ownership on what we as individuals and organizations could actually contribute to addressing food sustainability issues. I think our 1 minute is gone, and I'm hoping there are a number of points that have been put in the chart, and hopefully a lot of people will be able to share some of this information. And more people will be able to have access to this information as we go into the panel session. But at the moment, I will want to kind of look at the key challenges we have within the food system. As I mentioned before, 1 in 5 deaths linked to malnutrition. About 900 million people are currently hungry. Over 1.9 billion people are either obese or overweight. Over 1.3 billion tons go to waste. So it's really difficult to understand why, a lot of people will be in need while we're wasting a lot of food at the same time. And it's also very difficult why, why we can't understand, or why we're not able to understand the need for the balanced nutrition to be able to live a healthier life that can fight against diseases and fight against infections and help us live a more a better future for our children. So those are things that we need to really reflect on when we talk about food system sustainability challenges. Now, what do we do? How do we solve this problem? One of the things we've come to develop within IntelliDigest is what we call the Food Industry Sustainability Index. We've built this up based on the 6 pillars of sustainability, which is purpose, people, partnerships, and peace, and then prosperity. And what we try to encourage every stakeholder in the food system to be able to look at how they engage with these different key pillars of sustainability and how that defines their approach as a business within the food system in ensuring that they uphold sustainability across the different things they do. So it's about how you treat the people you work with, the purpose which you bring on. What is your purpose as an organization? What drives you? What is the key thing that defines your organization? And this is really important that as farmers, as food processors, as food producers, we have a key purpose that drives us. And that key purpose should be to ensure that whatever we're doing is sustainable and we can provide good food for all. But the way you coin that as an organization could be quite different. And that should live out across your organization and be demonstrated across your organization. And also, I think I really love, some of the things that Jillian and Claire has really talked about in terms of partnerships and how you work with different organizations. That's really bringing out that practicality of how you engage with different organizations to drive partnership. And I think that has come out clearly also in the Global Agri-Food Techpreneur program, which we have run, having to work with the Royal Bank of Scotland and also with STFC Food Network to ensure that young people can meaningfully engage with the food system. But really something that's very important is that businesses and farms and stakeholders in the food system should understand that for every organization, our impact, wherever we do, has an impact on peace within the society where we're working. So putting that in mind and in the way we engage is very fundamental, and will help us to think about the war and the crisis that we have. Could it be mitigated if businesses can become more conscious about what they do and how that has got impact within the society? A very crucial issue that every business should have at the forefront to ensure that they are driving positive impact within the societies where they engage with. And this comes again to some of the things we heard about local food production, local supply chain, helping to make sure that your business have a positive impact within the society where you do business. And ultimately, carbon, planet, we need to make sure that that works for us. So thank you so much. It's been a fantastic event today, having to look at how we can plan a more sustainable food system. I think we need to really ensure that we do plan and we do ensure that what we do is really sustainable. So I think Steph is here telling me to wrap up, and I'll have to call it a stop here, but really passionate about helping to ensure that we have sustainable food system and we can get
you
more
passionate. Never. I mean, come on, I would never have guessed that from your presentation. Theo, can I ask you to bring the other speakers back onto the stage, please? Ify, thank you so much for that really very passionate and really insightful showcase from you about the wonderful work that you're doing at IntelliDigest. Wow, I mean, I really am. I just feel very privileged to be on the stage with the three of you, because I think the work that you're each doing is just absolutely phenomenal. And if we could multiply and scale you up, we would absolutely have a much better planet that's in a heck of a better state than it is at the moment. One of the things that I'm really struck by is that I'm sure in our audience we've got a lot of young farmers and agriculturalists and entrepreneurs. And so I was wondering if I could ask the three of you, starting with Jillian. I mean, how did you really start in your journey of kind of agriculture, but also this very particular style of kind of regenerative and nature-based farming? What was your kind of early stage in interest in it, and how did you kind of develop that?
Yeah, I mean, I think growing up in the global south, we still have a lot of indigenous land-based cultural behavior that's around us. So it was pretty obvious. And at about 17, I moved to the US and I saw a very different system in the global north and a different type of interaction with indigeneity, with the natural world around. And so I think it reinforced my experience of finding ways for us to live with, create relationships that are healthy within the human community and with the human and the non-human community. And so I was lucky. I mean, I spent a lot of my childhood in rivers by myself, playing and talking to fish, climbing trees and staying there for the whole day, eating fruit with other neighborhood children. So I think that you have to kind of know where you are and where your country and land base is in the progression from a more indigenous land-based system to one that's more industrialized. And so the answers won't be the same in every place.
Yeah. Oh, just but I think that point about playing in nature and exploring, I was thinking actually when you were speaking and when Claire was speaking and knowing the work that IFI does, we invite a lot of young people to the farm that we have with Sustainable Thinking Scotland, and they've never seen a vegetable before, or they don't know what a chicken looks like, or what where an egg comes from. So an awful lot, I think, of the work that we need to do and to try and encourage is that education role to help children and young people explore nature and understand where their food comes from. Claire, I could ask you the same question. What inspired your interest, and how did you kind of pursue this passion?
So I guess I've my career has always been about agriculture, but I definitely was more of the conventional. Went to agricultural college and had a kind of conventional view. I'd always had an interest in animal welfare, and I kind of was interested in system shifts that were needed to help animals live a life worth living, rather than just freedom from pain. Yes, it's only really been in the last few years that I've actually got into regenerative agriculture, and I think it was an amalgamation of different things. It was that definite feeling of being on a treadmill that often farmers talk about. We're sort of stuck in this. It was this like, oh, hopefully the weather will be better next year. Hopefully we won't get that disease in the lambs. Hopefully this won't happen. And it just, high levels of suicide, high levels of depression, high levels of accidents at work that we see in farming. And I definitely started to think, I don't know if this is all worth it. And but of course we've got to produce food. So why is it so hard? That's what happened to me about 3 years ago. And now I talk often about, I had to kind of get myself a new set of farming friends, because certainly 3 years ago, my kind of existing farming friends, I couldn't really talk about this stuff because just thought I was crazy. But now, like, the world has changed. Everyone's talking about it now, and that's brilliant and amazing, great momentum behind it.
Yeah, I was going to ask all of you actually about that perception shift. I mean, if I was kind of talking to you 5 years ago, I would have thought, oh wow, okay, these women are really radical. Do you get that kind of radical label put on you, or do you feel like the perception has and is changing?
Ife, were you going to answer? Okay. Well, I mean, I would have to say there's been a dramatic change in language. I have been focused on colonial structures and decolonizing and racism and different forms of oppression for a long time. And for quite a while, using that type of language was really treated with a lot of opposition, a lot of pushback, a lot of labeling, and as a female, getting attacked verbally. Whereas now, all of a sudden, like, the most conservative people are using that language. It's quite a shock, actually, to me sometimes. Great that it gets mainstreamed, but we also have to examine a concept that Femi Taiwo, who's a philosopher in Georgetown University, calls elite capture. So I think we have to embrace it, but we also have to examine how this is different from looking at indigenous groups, indigenous practices. How does this look in the industrial world? And how can we shift our perspective to actually not discount a way that is more systemic, which is what you'll see in land-based cultures. It's not just a word, it's not just a performance, it's actually a philosophy.
Yeah, and what about that kind of, I guess when you're talking about kind of indigenous land-based practices, for so long they've been kind of brushed aside and the voices haven't been listened to. What do you feel like that there is a power shift going along with this kind of change in perception?
Is that for me?
Yeah.
Well, I would have to say that the fact that the work that I and my communities globally and locally are doing shows that maybe we've had a shift in perception. I actually think it's a lot harder to give up something that you had than to get something that you never had. And so I think leadership really should come from those who are moving into expanded power. It's really, really difficult to get effective leadership. I mean, we know it as women, we know it as rural people. It's really difficult to give somebody who's had something the leadership when they have to give up what is perceived to give up something. So there has been a shift, but I think a lot of the shift is coming from those of us who are getting an expanded awareness of the situation of diminished power in which we were functioning for so long, and the implications of that on our farming systems and our food systems. And I think that's where the work that I and the communities I interact with, that's where it's coming from.
Ify, what about you? I mean, you've done a lot of work in this space for many years now. Like, have you also seen this kind of similar shift and transition over the more recently in terms of kind of more sustainable thought practices and thinking kind of more ecologically?
I mean, I think this panel answers your question, Stephanie.
But are we talking in an echo chamber? You're working a lot with kind of big hotel groups. You're working with kind of large, the same thing that that Claire was talking about in terms of kind of the big corporates. I guess one of the concerns that we have in that space is that it's just about greenwashing. Do you feel like there is an actual shift rather than just a kind of PR shift? Is that an unfair question?
Okay, thank you so much, Steph, for drilling deeper into that particular question. And I think what we certainly know is that we are in the decade of action, right? So we need to do something by 2030. And if you don't do something by 2030, it's going to be disastrous. And I think that is the main reason why we had the UN Food Summit, which Samira talked about, trying to bring in stakeholders to really discuss and see how we can take things forward. The UK, they've had the food strategy, which the report has been made available. There's a lot more that can be done in terms of what the report has contained, and being really specific that we need to ensure that people have the right nutritional intake that they need to live a healthy life. So I think that is really fundamental. But how this leading food organization really taking a role in it is something that we may have to put up a survey into and then try to publish that in the next webinar. So please keep in touch and look out for it.
What about you, Claire? I mean, do you see that kind of similar shift from a corporate perspective, or is there still a kind of major concern about greenwashing in the space?
Yeah, definitely still a major concern, because I guess it's that bit I'm talking about. We need a total system redesign, not just a little tweak. And of course, big powerhouse businesses, they're tankers, aren't they? It takes a long time to turn something in a new direction. And so nobody's going out there and intentionally greenwashing, but the realities of the changes that are needed are sometimes bigger than what their kind of current scope is. So what we're seeing is lots of, I would say, like pilots and trials to work out what to do next. Is that enough? Is that quick enough before 2030? I don't know, because in an agricultural, in a cattle situation, we're really thinking, in the next couple of years, the animals that are kind of being thought about now will be being born in 2030. Like, it's not very long in farming terms. So I think that there's definitely more to do. Definitely more to do.
Absolutely. Jillian, one of the things that you mentioned is about our ecosystem and gastronomy choices, and I'm wondering, you've all, well, especially Claire and Jillian, talked a lot about the farming side of things, but obviously part of that is about educating consumer as well, right? And kind of what's in season and what's available. What can you say to that? How do we go about that? I mean, have you kind of seen best practice examples, something that we talked about in the first session? How do we educate people to kind of think more sustainably and choose I don't know if there's such a thing as the right foods, but certainly things that are more kind of sustainable.
Right. We are doing that in practice. And I think it's interesting that I went from a situation where I used to admire these long fields of annuals and grains and so on, to a point that when I look at it, I'm horrified. And part of that has been, I had the perennial system around me, but it was considered old-fashioned, primitive. There were all these words that we were using for that system. And so I think there is a lot of careful and tender examination of what we learned as desirable, and especially chefs and the people driving the food space. So right now, we in Cross Atlantic and in ARC are attempting to do a lot of conversation with chefs about issues of equity, about issues of using perennials. I mean, it's a fairly straightforward system, but in my lifetime, I've seen our eating habits go from perennials to annuals. And you can't, in a tropical ecosystem, rely on annuals without destroying your soil, your equity, and everything else. So part of it is really that thoughtful examination of people who did things in a particular way and developing a respect for them and getting the information. So that has been a really big personal and organizational journey for us. And we have our own cafe and we do our own catering. And in it, we try to show examples. But I can tell you, I've walked into restaurants discussing this, and the chefs have all been trained in classical global north institutions, and they really don't have a clue anymore how to use what is easy to grow and is so delicious.
Is that something that speaks to your experience as well, Claire?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely, my friends just finished a thesis on this exact thing, and that there's still a massive gap between understanding of it. But I think we talked about seasonality for a number of years and trying to eat more in season. But I think it's a step on from that now, and I would say that perennial agriculture is relevant even up here, because we're having the same problems. We're just a bit further behind, and so annual agriculture to be relied on long term, and for the world, we're at risk, aren't we? 5 grains or whatever it is that we rely on, we need to move away from that. So I think it goes beyond that, but I do think the nutrient density and flavor is key to unlocking maybe that, because this is such a big complicated message for everybody to get their heads around.
It is, and I think in the UK especially, certainly a lot of the movements that I've seen around kind of eating seasonally, especially from a restaurant perspective, the cost price of that tends to be so much more than low cost food that it really becomes the preserve of a very small percentage of people. So Iffy, I don't know, in the work that you've been doing, you've been working with a lot of charity groups around where we are in the Edinburgh area in terms of trying to kind of widen the boundaries, I guess, and there are quite significant hurdles to good quality food here in terms of financial barriers anyway.
Absolutely. I think really looking at how people can have access to the right food that provides them the right nutrition in the most sustainable way is fundamental, and is really important that we have to drive that forward for the future. Like Jillian said, seeing that field with just this monocrop, it's really a painful situation because we're just destroying the soil. And what we need to do is have this more kind of improved food production, regenerative agricultural practices. But how do you get that to happen? That's one of the things we try to do at IntelliDigest, engaging with local farmers. We've developed the meal plan, which is part of the World Food Tracker platform. When you say to people, can you just plan your meal for 6 months? They go like, that is impossible. I can't do that. I want it on time, real time, just now, what I want, I need to have it. That's the world we live in. And what we're trying to do is help people to think about, if you can do this for 6 months, it helps that farmer to think about how, okay, I know there's someone who's going to use this. I can plan how I grow my food and becomes more sustainable. The challenge is that currently farmers depend on the current supply chain. The current supply chain means that they have to grow this in a certain way and supply to this supply chain. And if they don't do it, that means they don't have the money. And they're so dependent on the supply chain that it becomes so difficult for them to think about doing something a bit differently. And that's why I love when I see farmers who decide, okay, really, I'm going to take this challenge on. I'm going to do it right because I know it's good for the soil, it's good for the environment, it's good for everybody. It's going to improve the quality of the product I'm going to have. And those are the farmers we really want to support. And we also want to support consumers, everyday person, to know that they can contribute to addressing the food sustainability challenge. Only if you can plan your meal, you can empower the local farmer to do the right thing. So that is the approach we take into it. People think it's difficult. We're developing an algorithm that can help you do that a lot more easy. So that's the importance of technology helping us to adopt sustainable practices. And if you've not got in touch with the World Food Tracker, please do download it, sign up for it, and really make sure that you start planning. Plan.
Well, I think planning might be our takeaway from this afternoon's session. I mean, that seems to have cropped up in an awful lot of the talks that we've had. I've just looked at the clock. We're already 2 minutes over, and this afternoon is just absolutely whizzed by. I have to say a massive thank you to all of the speakers, because it has just been such a wonderfully rich, very thought-provoking, and hopefully a change-making afternoon. I would ask all of the speakers, if you're on LinkedIn, please connect with IFI and IntelliDigest. And if you've got, just write a comment underneath the session today, so that everybody who's online can see who you are and can find you independently if they want to. And Claire, I 100% agree with your point about the focus on carbon. It drives me up the wall. And so I'm going to chase you for your slide on that, because I'm going to reuse it in everything that I do. But I am very, 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 I'm sorry about the comment there from Professor Adeloyo, who says that he says that the discussion's been monopolized by the speaker and the moderators. I'm sorry that you feel like we haven't been inclusive enough. But I wasn't seeing that many questions coming in, particularly on this session, which has surprised me, because I thought it was just absolutely superb. But apologies to you if you felt excluded in that. That certainly wasn't the intention. But very, very massive thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to Iffy and Theo for arranging. And I hope to either connect with you or meet you in person at some point in the not too distant future. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great weekend.